Hello everyone and welcome to this module. Here we are going to be sewing the cup corset. Don't forget, we drafted the cup corset and now we're going to be sewing the cup corset. Here I have all my fabrics cut out according to my pattern. Don't forget, I told you that when you are cutting, you should make sure that you are still cutting according to the shape of what you had on your pattern, in as much as you are going to be adding your sewing allowance to it. So you can see I have my doll face and I have my lining. Stay has been fused to the doll face. So what I did was to have my stay double at the front and single at the backs. Alright, so everything is here cut out, well ironed. And as you can see, all my pattern pieces has the same shape as what my pattern. Okay, so now we're going to be moving on to joining these patterns together. The first thing I'm going to be working with is to join all my linings together first. For the boning techniques now, the boning techniques which I'm going to be doing now is going to be on my lining. So I'm going to be creating a top stitch . Now whatever you are creating as your top stitch has to be a width of the kind of boning you are working with, the size of boning you are working with. So what I'm doing now is to top stitch my seam allowance. So it's an inbuilt casing, not an external casing. So as you can see, I've top stitched. Alright. So the next thing for me to do is to sew the cup to it. Alright. So what I'm going to be doing for my lining here, I'm still going to be maintaining the excess which I have added to it. So I always prefer to have an excess for the cup at the lining. So that excess will just be pleated around the dart area. Now the reason why I love to have excess is so that the breast can be able to occupy the cup without having any issues with the lining. So as you can see, I've pleated it and I have XX. I'm going to be doing the same thing for the second part. Okay, so you can see I've done the same thing for the other cup. So the next thing for me to do now is to go and iron, then we insert the boning. Now don't forget, ironing must be part of an habit that you need to, embrace in order for you to achieve a perfect finished work. Now I'm going to be joining the front panels. So starting with my center front. So you are going to be sewing off what you added as your center front seam. This is my fabric. So I'll be joining all the linings together. I'll be joining all the fabrics together just as it was from the pattern. So what I'm doing now is trimming off the excess from the hairstay. After gumming your hairstay, definitely there will be an excess, so you just have to trim it off so you are sure of what you are sewing. It also makes your work look very neat. So now to the other side. can see, I'm still joining my panels together. So I'll do the same thing for the lining. For the other hand, so my lining too coming through. That's for this part. So you can see now for the other hand. So I'm joining the last panel for the front, side front panel. Okay. So don't forget your sewing allowance which you added to it, the 1/2 inch sewing allowance. So now you can see I have all my front panels together. Don't forget how the pattern was made. The center front, the center piece, and the side front. So all is what we have here. The center front, the middle panel, and the side front. Center front, middle panel, the side front. So the same thing done for the fabric is what we're going to be doing for the lining. So let me join the last panel for the side front for the lining. Joining the last panel. Okay, so now I have for my lining all joined. I'm going to be doing the same step also for the back. So I have my center back piece. I have my middle piece and I have my side back piece. Just as we have the panels for the front, now we also have the panels for the back, which we are going to be joining now. So the same joinings for the fabric, we are going to be doing the same thing for the lining. So fabric to fabric, lining to lining. So I have the first side for the back panels. So the last panels. So this is the back panel for the second one. So now moving on, I'm going to be joining the panels also for the cup. Now what I have done here is to add extra allowances for the cup. If you realize, I have ½ inch at the panels, at the panel line, then I have 1½ at the side and at the upper part. So now this excess which I'm adding now is because I'm going to introduce my cup into it. So by the time I pad it, then I'm going to trim it off back to my sewing allowance. Don't worry, just join us, continue watching. You're going to understand during the process. So the number 1 and the number 2. So now we have the number 1, the number 2. Don't forget, the number 1 piece is at the center front, while the number 2 piece is towards the side front. So you're going to be joining the number 1 piece and the number 2 piece together. Don't forget you are sewing ½ inch for the panel lines here. Then for the second part also, the number 1 piece and the number 2 piece together, sewing your 1/2 inch off it. So we have this, and we also have this. Now the same process you've done for the fabric, you're also going to be doing the same thing for the lining. So the panel lines, number 1 piece and the number 2 piece together, and also for the second cup. So moving on, I'm going to be notching, because this is a curved seam. I'm going to be notching. You can have a distance of 1 inch. Then also for the fabric, so I'm just going to be reducing what I have here as my sewing allowance, so it doesn't get bulky by the time I press with iron. So at about 1/4. So now, with all the panels being joined, I'm going to be going to the pressing table to iron out all seams while opened. Okay, so let's move on. So now I've just finished ironing. Okay, so the next thing for me to do is to slot in my cup into its fabric. So what I'm going to be doing now, don't forget, when we're making a pattern, we marked a point used to get what? The cup placement. Okay, so now we're going to be aligning those points to the seam. Now don't make a mistake by mixing up the cups together. We have the one for the left, we have the one for the right, so you need to note them down. Okay, so what I'm working with now is for the left. So now make sure that the points which you've marked align with the seam. Then also the same thing goes for the upper part. So the points aligning with the seam. So I'm going to be pinning it down. So we also do the same thing for the second end. Making sure that the panels meet. So you have to be very careful when placing this, because a wrong placement, you will have to repeat. Compulsory. So now here I have my placement, and as you can see, it is well placed. Okay, so the next thing for me to do now is to have a temporary seam holding down the cup. So I'm just going to be sewing this down at the tip. So it's a temporary stitch just for me to hold down the cup. So now you can see I have this. I'm going to be doing the same thing for the second cup. Also try as much as possible that you don't have excess. So you see, we have this. So a case whereby after creating this seam, you're having maybe like a pleat fold, maybe while sewing, you can have such an issue. So please make sure that you don't have any pleat fold. So you have to repeat. Try as much as possible that there is no pleat folds. Everything is relaxing, just like this. So once you have this, preferably you go to iron just to smoothen it out. So now you can see it has been well ironed, right? And you can see it's well relaxed, no folds. Same thing also with this, well ironed. So now the next thing for me to do now is to trim off. Don't forget, I told you we added an extra to it just for us to be on the safe side to placing the cup. So now we're going to be cutting off to be left with just ½ inch for the sewing allowance. So you see, so now that I have this, don't forget your placement. We have the left side, we have the right side. Okay, so now this is just going to be for the right side. So what I'm just going to do now is trim off this. Then I come to fix my cup into this. So now, understanding the fact that when you drafted the pattern, the panel lines were meeting. Okay, so that's the essence of that placement of the cup, that we had to make sure that it aligns also. So now, it must also meet back to this. So you can try as much as possible to confirm the meeting point. So preferably you pin it down. Then we sew. So we sew from that point to this other end. So try as much as possible to be careful of what you are sewing, so you don't end up ripping. So I'm done with this end. I'll be sewing the other end. As you can see, I'm done sewing this part and we have no excess or pleat folds fitting accurately. So now I'm going to be sewing the second cup to it. Make sure that the seams are meeting. Also sewing from the dart point. Okay, so you can see I'm done with this part. Now for the second end. So here is where you experience your sewing skills for curved sewing. So here I have this also, all laying flat, and as you can see, the space in between is accurate. No part is bigger than the other, and there are no folds. So this is how yours should also be when you are sewing. So we go to iron for proper finishing.